The Juneau World Affairs Council presents Stealth Sisters and Threads of Hope. Sahar provides underground education for women and girls under Taliban rule, with activist Shogofa Amini. Speaker Shogofa Amini, a native of Mazar-e-sharif, is the program director of Sahar. She is an award-winning women's rights activist and holds degrees in international relations and global health. She will talk about her program's work, as well as her own journey under the Taliban.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. First of all, thank you so much for having me here. I'm very happy to be here, and thank you for giving me this opportunity coming here and talk about Afghanistan, what's happening there, and share my stories. And especially thanks to Bruce to being such a great host, actually, and showing me to around Juneau, except today, which wasn't that friendly, but hopefully in the summer I will definitely visit, which I really love the view and the nature. So today in my presentation, this is my agenda. I will take you for a short virtual visit in Afghanistan and talk about Afghanistan, and then try to learn where the Afghanistan located and Afghanistan under the Taliban, what happened at the first era and what happened the second era. And then the other part is my journey in the United States and how I am working with Sahar. And then I will talk about the part, our work with the Sahar organization, what kind of work we did before the Taliban and what kind of work we do now, right now, under the Taliban. And there will be a time for Q&A. So before going to my presentation, I would like to ask you questions. What do you think what do you know about Afghanistan? When the word comes about Afghanistan in your mind, what do you think? What is your impression? Like what you hear from the news, or what is your thoughts about that?
Mountainous.
Mm-hmm.
An oppressed society.
Hospitality.
Thank you. And how about the location-wise? Do you know where it's located?
Central Asia.
Okay. Thank you. The reason I ask the question, because my experience being in the U.S., most of the time when I give a presentation or in my school, the question was asked, like, is Afghanistan located in the Middle East? Is Afghanistan located next to Iran or Saudi Arabia? Because Afghanistan is a Muslim country, we do have a Persian language, and also the Quran and the Holy Book is in Arabic, and there's some misunderstanding that there might be Afghanistan might be located in the Middle East. Afghanistan is located in Central Asia with a population of 34.66 million. So, like I said, Afghanistan is a landlocked country, and with the provinces of like 34 provinces with the neighboring country, Iran, Pakistan, Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, and Turkmenistan. And one of the challenging that Afghanistan has been facing last 40 years so far is because of how it's located geographically, which is in the central of Asia. And one thing about Afghanistan is a very rich in natural resources, which most part of that's like part of the conflict as well. Let me tell you, like you said, Afghanistan, you may have seen Afghanistan on the news, like how it's bombarded, war, and there are some part of the Afghanistan which hasn't shown and on the news or on the TVs. So I will take you some part of the provinces in Afghanistan, which is very beautiful and natural and nature-wise. And this is the Nuristan, one of the provinces in Afghanistan. It is very green, and we do have a 4 season, and it's summer, fall, winter. It's very beautiful. And then there's another province, it's like Logar, Afghanistan. It's also a mountain country. One of the reasons I like Seattle, and I also liked Juno is because it's the mountains and the beauty that is very much related. It's remind me home. And Bamiyan, Afghanistan, one of the very famous province, which you might have heard, biggest Buddha was in Afghanistan, that one of the tallest in the world. Unfortunately, it was destroyed by the Taliban when they came first time. And this is a Mazar-e-sharif, which my hometown, it's very well known in Blue Mosque, and that's where I was raised and born in Mazar-e-sharif. And that's where actually it's the north part of Afghanistan where our work, Sahar organization works there. Before the Taliban, we only worked in north part of Afghanistan, Mazar-e-sharif, but after the Taliban, we got our work more spread and working in Kabul, which is center of Afghanistan. So what happened to this beautiful country that has a beautiful view? And what you have seen in on the news, Afghanistan used to be a very peaceful country where especially women had access to education, access to, like the men and women actually both studied together. And there was a time that there was like people go to visit there, and mostly women were allowed to get a degree, travel around the world, and go back to Afghanistan and participate to practice their degrees as a doctor, as an engineer, as a lawyer. It was a very peaceful time of Afghanistan. Unfortunately, throughout the time, if I go through the timeline of the war in Afghanistan, you might have, some of you know, like the invasion of the British, and then Russia, and then US. This all like, and also part of the internal conflict really create the war in Afghanistan that is collapsed, and people had to leave Afghanistan, like millions of Afghans in that time, after the 1997, left the country in neighboring country in Iran, Pakistan, some outside of the country like US or European countries. So that ended up, the war ended up, we ended up from that era to this era. It's hard to believe how that happened. Women under the Taliban in the first era, like 1996 to 2001, that's the time when I was a very young kid. And one of the darkest age of the Taliban in Afghanistan, where women experience it. It was much stricter than they are right now. The first thing when the Taliban came the first time, what they did was they closed the schools and destroyed the schools. Like whatever they see, the schools, they either burn them, destroy them, all the documents. And it was very surprising, not only outside of the world, and the people inside Afghanistan was shocked. Why and what's happening to the country? Women were eliminated from social and political life. Women were like banned from any form of education. Basically, it was like everything was stopped. Women were banned from working outside of the house, and they couldn't leave the house without the male relatives. As a growing up, and I have witnessed that, women, whoever left the home, either beaten or killed by Taliban. And as a kid, I was witness. Even I was very, very young, but I had to wear burqa and to hide myself. And basically, in that time, women were invisible from the society, vanished. You don't see any woman on the street, no doctor, no engineer, no teacher, no one. Everyone was invisible. So luckily, they didn't last longer. That after 9/11 happened, 9/11 happened, and America went to Afghanistan. That was a time when school started back. It's kind of like, if I describe this was a dark cloud, and the light came back. So people had lived their life for 5 years in the darkness, mostly affected for women. And they're like behind for 5 years from school, from work, from education. And from 2001 to 2021, women were mostly NGOs, government were heavily invested on women's education. Women were participating in educations, schools, studying outside of the country. And between 2001 to 2003, the higher education has increased the 70%, and also literacy level have increased around like 30%, because there were much more activity around, like women were participating in education. And most importantly, women were back to in politics. Like you see 69 out of 249 seats were in parliament. They become like more activist in politics. They become active to be a governor in Afghanistan. We had 2 governors in Afghanistan, women governor, which was like, you see like how much the women had a passion for education to get back to the work. And not only that, women were like back to music, arts, playing music and singing. And in that time, women had an opportunity come outside of Afghanistan to pursue their education, which was my generation, and I had the opportunity to come to US and get my education. And then there were scholarships available for women, like Fulbright, master's degree for their PhD. So that was like very heavily focused for women to pursue their education and invested on women. What happened for that? Like 20 years invested for women's and younger generation invested for 20 years education, building schools, universities, private schools. It's all like happened till 2021, until the US decided to pull out the troops and decided to sign a peace contract with the Taliban, knowing that who the Taliban is, what they could do with the women. It was not surprisingly that they didn't know that. They knew that who the Taliban is. And pulling out the troops within not a week actually, the day, didn't take them that long to take over Afghanistan, and did everything, history repeated itself again. Currently, what happened, 80% of school-age Afghan girls and young women, 2.5 million are out of the school. In last year, December, university was banned for women, and hundreds of thousands of female students from private schools are banned. Like basically, once again, that happened again for women, and women had to pay the price. The politicians and politics making decision, and women had to pay the price for each decision they are making. Then each decision, like pushing back all these generations back, and like 20 years made it 50 years back. Like imagine all these women who are talented, they're doctors, engineers, politicians, are staying home looking for jobs, desperate to get out, but they cannot. Again, they are banned to work in local offices, NGOs, and even the smallest thing that they can have is their rights. For like beauty salons are closed. They are not allowed to go to beauty salons, which is doesn't make sense, but that's the policy they are bringing. And they banned education for employment. Like how much all this stuff is affecting country's economy? It's hugely. Country's economy really collapsed because half of the population are staying home and not getting education. So what happened is like women in Afghanistan are resilient, strong. They are not like last 20 years. They have been very motivated, and they were empowered, and they know what education is and how to get it back. They have been very active, even right after the Taliban. All the NGOs left Afghanistan, but still there are some women rights activists. They're fighting with the Taliban. Like Mahbouba Siraj is one of the very activist Afghan women. She's still in Afghanistan, confronting with the Taliban, negotiating, talking with them, open the schools for girls, and protesting against the Taliban, regardless of like they've been killed, kidnapped, and threatening them, but still women are getting up to asking them to open the schools. Even you can see like around the world, it's hardly been paying attention what's happening in Afghanistan, but still inside they are speaking up against the Taliban. There are secret schools that women are participating, vocational trainings. Entrepreneurs, women are there active either secretly or one other way. They're helping women inside Afghanistan. There are some protestings that happen outside of Afghanistan, like DC, it happened in Seattle, some other part of the states that they were protesting for Afghans. So, how does all this related to my journey? Like, who am I and how I ended up in US with the first era of like I was born and raised. I basically describe myself as a child war who was born in a war, raised in a war, and spent my adulthood in a war until I left Afghanistan to come to US. You know, education is the fundamental human rights. We all know this. And this is part of, in some part of the world, is taken away from them, like Afghanistan. I'll tell you my story, which I was a young woman that was taken away from me. As a woman, I had to stay home, not allowed to go to school for 5 years. 5 years is just a number. Spending it for a child, we're not allowed to go to school, spend at home, and even not to listen to music or any activities you want to do. I clearly remember when I was a 6th grade when the Taliban came. And it was very hard for me to even imagine like not able to go to school. And it was painful to see my childhood spending during the war. I was frightened, scared. And today, thousands of children are spending their life like this. What do we expect them to become in the future? And what is their future will hold? You know, there's a saying that says that a country has half of the population only having access to education and not other half is doomed to failure. And that's exactly what's happening in Afghanistan. Half of the population is not allowed to get access to education, especially women. They is basically vanished from the society. At the time when the Taliban came, the first thing when they closed the school was the hardest thing for me to accept that. But I was lucky that my mother was a principal. It was hard for her to accept she cannot teach for girls anymore. She was also women's rights activist and very active in the community in Afghanistan. She was a principal in high school. When I told her, like, what should I do, Mom? I want to go to school because as a kid, I didn't understand what's happening. And she took me in my room, clear everything, and put the board on the wall and pulled the chair and said, like, this is your classroom. I will be your teacher, and this will be your school until the school's open. So that was my secret school with my mom for 5 years. With my siblings, with my sister, I was homeschooled for 5 years by my mom. And even when I was inviting my neighbors secretly, like, come, we have a secret school, we can study, we have a small school here. It was a sad thing, but at the same time, sometimes I dreamed going to school, sometimes I dreamed to being, holding my books, going to school. Even at the time, my mom took a risk to letting us to go outside and learn English, knowing that if I get caught by the Taliban, I will be beaten, probably killed, even put my teacher's life in danger. Despite that, my teacher and my mother taking a risk to educating us like something that is even risky at that time. And that time, I realized that importance of education, how that is important, and how much the Taliban are scared to allow to women to have the education. It is because we know, like, if you educate a man, you educate only one person. But if you educate a woman, you educate a family. you educate the community, you educate the country. That is how we have a better society. So, and they were afraid to giving the power to women because they get things done. So that is why they were like eliminating women from the power. And that was a time, and I realized it, and I holded my hopes and dreams that education is something I will continue with it, regardless of how much it's risky, how much it's challenging. Moving fast forward, that didn't last longer. When the Taliban left, one of the happiest moments of my life that when I heard that they're gone. I feel like I can describe like a bird who been in the cage, dark cage for a long time. And when you open the door and the bird want to fly in a sky higher as much as she could. That's how I felt when I heard the schools are open. I just want to learn as much as I can. And I was lucky I had my mom where she supported my education as my model, as my role model. She is not with me anymore. She passed away, but she passed her responsibility, her passion on me, like how education is important, how to continue with that passion. I was able to come in the United States through the exchange program, and without knowing what this journey would look like. And at 18 years old, I was so excited. I was myself, my mentor, T.D. he was a founder of SOLA, a School of Leadership in Afghanistan. He put me in a plane. He said, like, go find your way. So that's where I landed in Boston, Massachusetts, getting my degree in 2013 to 2016 in my bachelor degree in international relations. And it was not easy for me to leaving my family, my country behind. It was the hardest thing. I made a decision, but the only thing I want to do is an education, to get an education and come back to Afghanistan to help. And after I finished my bachelor's degree, I wanted to pursue my work to work in an organization that's in Sahar 2018 to till now that I'm working as a fellow, as a program manager, and then I did my master's in global health. So, and that's I related with Sahar because Sahar is a nonprofit organization that founded by an American lady in Afghanistan, and she went to Afghanistan. She wanted to do something to help Afghan women, especially building schools, repairing schools, and providing educational programs for women. Our mission before, we were working closely with Ministry of Education, but now we are partners with Afghan-based grassroots organization to create educational programs and and create a space for girls and women in Afghanistan to empowering and inspiring them and their families with thriving communities. So what is our impact? Last 20 years, we have been educated to 250,000 girls and 18 public schools built and repaired. And 23,000 girls were educated for each year. And 850 female teachers were trained. And 100 girls were provided a coding class. And 1,500 were graduated from early marriages program as one of the very important topics that girls in Afghanistan were married in early ages. And that creates a lot of problems and maternal mortality. So that's where we take initiative to educate women about the women's rights, leadership, how if you, especially with the family that allow their daughters to be in a school. So right now, when the Taliban came the second time, everything destroyed. We lost our partners, we lost our students. We had to start back from the scratch. So this time, our work is more organic, working like closely with the students. We create a program, Silta Sisters, which women empowerment, under the topic of like leadership, mental health is most importantly, and health workshop, reproductive health that we teach with the girls. And IT as well, like computer and coding classes. So this is one school that we closely work in Mazar-e-sharif with partners. And then underground tech heroes. This is the home-based schools. When we didn't find working with the government, we tried to find other ways to educate girls. Underground, like we basically in the kind of like teaching them at home, computer and coding and web designing. And this is the era is like technology. As you see that how much technology making the world smaller. And that's where we are taking this step to teaching girls IT and coding. They can learn the skills and take classes, online jobs that's providing them some job skills for them. Traits of hope. Literacy and sewing classes for women is one of the most kind of another creating jobs inside of Afghanistan. And our project is like once the project ends, we give the machines for women to start their small businesses, like sewing businesses at home. And last but not least, Men as a Partner Change. That is another program we had before the Taliban, to educating men as well as like women. Because if you educate the women only, that creates a conflict. So how to balance it is important. So I personally closely work to create this curriculum as Men as a Partner Change to bring men on the table to talking about the women's rights, human rights, and leadership, and mostly conflict resolution, domestic violence, because you have to talk with the men what is their rights as a human, because in the countries like Afghanistan is a patriarchal society, we have to bring them and have this conversation with them. So this is our programs last 2 years. We graduated 550 students. And we're starting our Men as a Partner Change like this month. And I would like to play a video from one of our students that has a subtitle.
خداوند بخشاینده و مهربان، صدف محمدی هستم، یک تن از شاگردان دوره اول برنامه ظرفیت سازی خانم ها. این برنامه یک چانس خوبه برای من و دیگر دختر خانم ها بود که مدت 6 ماه طول کشید و واقعا ما از این برنامه خیلی چیزهای خوب، کاربردی و آموزنده را آموختیم. این برنامه توانست تا من اعتماد به نفس بالایی داشته باشم و استعدادهای پنهانی خود را بدانم و یک هدف در زندگی خود داشته باشم. و یک دوره عالی بود که در این دوره من زبان انگلیسی را آموختم و با مهارت‌های کامپیوتری آشنا شدم. و همچنان چیز مهمه که فهمیدم و دانستم که برای یک دختر خانم خیلی مهم و بارزش میباشه، حق و حقوقش است که من به حیث یک دختر خانم فهمیدم. و بعد از 6 ماه ترنینگ که ما داشتیم، همین باعث شد که من فعالیت‌های داشته باشم و حالا ما فعالیت‌های خود در خانه آغاز کردیم و یک کورس باز کردیم که همون دخترایی که به مکتب رفتن نمیتونن مضامین مختلف تدریس کنم و واقعا شاگردانم از من خیلی راضی هستم و این کورس به من هم مفاد مالی داشته و هم مفاد معنوی. همون مزدی که من از شاگردان به دست میارم اینمی باعث شده تا اینکه من همون احتیاجات خود برطرف کنم و تا جایی هم که فکر میکنم مستقل هم نیست شدیم. خب یک چیز جنبه مهم ازی که به من واقعا زیاد مهم و با ارزش است، امی است که در برنامه ظرفیت سازی خانم ها چیزایی که من فهمیدم و دانستم کوشش میکنم که اینمی را به شاگردانم بیاموزم تا باشد که دختران باشند که یک اعتماد به نفس بالایی و یک هدف و یک امید در زندگی خود یا داشته باشند و من حیث یک دختر خانم از حق و حقوق خود یا آگاه باشند. و همچنان من از برنامه‌های کامپیوتری که دانستم و فهمیدم و بسیار کاربردی بود، اینترنت بود که ما حالا با او دسترسی پیدا کردیم و میدانم این برنامه را و همین باعث شد که بعضی از اقاربای نزدیک ما طفلاشان که در خارج زندگی میکنن میکنن امیاره به شکل آنلاین مضمون دری و قرآن کریم تدریس کنم و همچنان ما بالای توانایی های خود خیلی باور دارم و با این اعتماد به نفسی که دارم انشالله که امیدوار هستم که یک روزی ما به هدف و آرزوهای خودم میرسم. ممنون از این فرصتی که برای ما ایجاد کردین و مرا به یک دختر قوی و مثبت اندیش متبدل ساختین. تشکر.
So this is
Most of us could not read the subtitles. I'm wondering if you could just give us a brief summary.
sure. So this is one of our students who participate in our program, and what she's talking about, like how much the program really affect her education and how much she was empowered. What happened was, like, after she graduated from our program and she's starting her homeschooling, she's teaching another girls, like a group of girls at home, and then the IT class she learned, she's teaching online some students outside of Afghanistan. And how much this really program empowered them that continuing her goals to achieve her goal. So this is one of our goals is sustainability, creating leaders on the ground. And this is one of the example that she came, even with this risk, she's taking risk to coming this class, and still they are trying to opportunities has been given to them. So these are one of the pictures from our classes, and there is a code. I can leave it in a few minutes. I know it's small, but briefly I can talk about it. Is she participated in a program and she take a video that she learned about the computer, like Excel, Word, Microsoft, and then she went back home and showed the video to her father. This is one of our works, like how we empower the families as well to encourage their daughters. So the father was so proud of her daughter's work, even today under the Taliban. He went and shows this video to everyone, like, look, my daughter has learned that computer and IT, and she can have a job now. So that's something that we're like even working with the families as well. So this is our underground tech sheroes, and I said, like, we're working home-based schooling. So they come at home secretly. Definitely Taliban not aware of it. So work is mostly with the people and at home. So this is something when we talk about the women in Afghanistan. When I think about like sheroes, I think of women in Afghanistan. They're truly resilient and working so hard. But I would like to end my presentation with a quote that one of our students, I do work with them closely, and she said, no matter what Taliban can ban the school, ban the education, but they cannot stop us from learning. We will come back stronger, and we will fight back with our education. So that's how we are there to support them, their education. So thank you so much, and thank you.
If you have any questions, please make use of the mic.
So thank you for your, am I good? Is it on? I can't tell. I know it's important for the recording. So what about now? Yeah. Okay. Thank you for your presentation. And just thinking of these last slides about secretly conducting schools in the home, like, what are the logistics of that? Like, how do you sneak a computer or a dozen into somebody's home?
That's a great question. Yes, like I said, as we are working with the grassroots organization, we're working with our previous partners that they are still there, some of them. So we're working with them, and they are providing, they're buying the computers, and definitely not like they're buying the computers like one by one. They are putting it at home, and one of the stories they say like it has a risk. It's not something they're not facing a risk. One of our students caught by one of the Taliban, and then she was asked like where she's going, because they noticed that like all students are like gathering in one place and coming out with holding computers, and she said like, oh, we're studying madrasa in Quran, which is like Taliban. You can get away with saying that, and definitely we're super careful. The logistics, like we're working with the partners that they have their own ways to doing that.
Where do they get the money to buy the computers?
Where we're supporting.
Use of the mic so we get it recorded.
I was just curious about where they get the money to buy the computers.
So we're providing the sponsorship. So we're
So you
Sahar is
have the-
providing the computer
Okay.
for them. Yes.
What I'm very surprised with, particularly as you read that Iraq and Iran have cracked down on internet access, I'm very surprised that Afghanistan, that these people have access to the internet. And
Yes.
how is that?
Yeah, I mean, that's something like I said, the last 20 years of investing in education in Afghanistan, internet, they couldn't cut off the internet. So they tried it, but it did not like win. But still, there are some limitation using the internet, but like how you have to know how securely you can use the internet. And that gives us an opportunity for providing these classes for them.
Are you able to go back into Afghanistan yourself and visit the schools?
Not now. Maybe in the future, but not now.
So you gave some examples of a person whose father was impressed with his daughter's education. What percentage of the men are Taliban and would not tolerate that at all, would be very violent against that? And what percentage of men would be considerate of the change that you're wanting to bring about?
That's a great question. Thank you. Yeah, like I said, Afghanistan is a predominantly patriarchal society, and definitely Taliban, who are men in Afghanistan, definitely not against of their daughters not to going to school. Personally, my experience working with the students, I do interview them individually actually at night, and asking them, one of our kind of survey, like qualitative survey, is like interviewing with them, understanding that how their families feel about the situation. And trust me, like most of the answers, like all of them answers, like their fathers were been very supportive, like letting their daughters to come, and they were like taking a risk. So the percentage, I cannot say exactly, but mostly the Taliban who are running the government is like stopping and not allowing their daughters. Or I can be more specific, the Taliban, who are the leader of the Taliban, even they are providing education for their daughters outside of Afghanistan. I can say specifically the spokesperson of the Taliban was interviewed, and he said that, yes, I educate my daughter she has a private teacher. We should not underestimate that Taliban is uneducated with the beer, with the shalwar kameez. No, they exactly know what they're doing, but they're they are playing with the women in Afghanistan, negotiating them with their education, playing them as a negotiating card with the international world. But on your questions, we can say men in Afghanistan in general, they are supportive of daughters. It's mostly the Taliban who are playing this political game with the women's rights.
So then are the Taliban leaders true believers, or are you saying that they're just using, holding women hostage to get more leverage on the international power stage?
Yes, they're holding women and as a hostage to to negotiate internationally. Like if you see that how they know that women's rights in women rights are human rights, and that how that affects in generally worldwide. If the woman doesn't get an education later on, it affects maternal mortality. Education level is going to go up, and that's where they know that where get the attention. So they definitely know what they're doing and holding the women as a hostage. And if you talk, and they're not collective leaders like government in Afghanistan. In some province, some Taliban are like, oh, okay, let's open the schools, but some are they're against it. They're very, very extreme way. So these are the group of organization which does not represent Islam, does not represent it's not Islamic, because it's some misunderstanding around the world oh, Taliban is Muslims and they're representing Islam, and Islam's supposed to do that. Even according to Islam, men and women have a right to study. Even the first verses in the Quran came Iqra, which means read and write and understand. Even if they follow that according to the Islam, that women has a right there. So this is something that it's their own agenda and political game.
If there are no other questions, thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you.
That was Shogofa Amini in this Juneau World Affairs Council presentation, produced in collaboration with KTOO. It was recorded September 14th, 2023 at KTOO in Juneau, with support from AELNP, Coeur Alaska Kensington Mine, Sea Alaska, and the University of Alaska Southeast.